This episode is brought to you by Absolute Landscapes. Absolute Landscapes is a landscape maintenance company that focuses heavily on commercial property maintenance. Call today for information about the services we provide and how we can best help you. 803-427-5944.
All right. So, if you want to kind of introduce yourself and give a background, like just preface the conversation, just kind of maybe who you are, what you do, what's going on.
Well, my name is Krista McLellan, and I am a bookkeeper by trade. And I find it funny that I help people deal with their finances because I wasn't always the best at dealing with mine. So I come from a place of having been there, done that. There's no shame, no blame with me because 11 years ago, I lost my husband to cancer, and I found out just how much I had my head in the sand and how much I left everything in his lap. I left all the responsibility, all the burden, and gave away all of my power about my money. And so my world came crashing to a halt, and I had two little children. They were 9 and 12 at the time. And all of a sudden we had to figure out how to survive financially. And I had to figure out how to handle my money. So not just handle my money, dig out of debt. And it was a struggle to figure out all the things that he did that I took for granted. That I always tell people, it's not a power struggle when you talk about money with your partner. It's about sharing the burden and sharing that responsibility. It's not fair to put it all on one person in that family. And I had no idea what he dealt with or was dealing with until I had to. So he passed away from cancer. He had a 10-month battle. So we had very little time to prepare or deal with anything. And he was a firefighter. So that meant you don't get life insurance for firefighters. So there was nothing for my children and I after he passed. So that first winter, I very clearly remember. I'm in New England. I'm in New Hampshire. We already have snow, right? It gets cold here. Our pipes freeze. And I was trying to figure out how I was going to afford tires because my tires weren't safe, and how I could, or oil, so I could heat my house. It was an either or at that point. There just wasn't enough money to stretch to cover both. And my children came to me as I was sitting there going over the budget, and they gave me their Christmas gift cards and told me they wanted tires for Christmas. Proud mama moment that they wanted to be part of the solution, but also made me feel like a huge failure. That I had put us in that position that they felt that they needed to give up because we didn't have money for Christmas presents. So those gift cards were it that they had got from family. That was it. That's how they were going to get anything. And they were going to give them up for tires. So I decided to learn about money management and debt management and cash flow, and to make it so we were no longer just surviving, that I didn't have to hide my car in the garage from the repo man anymore. So when I say I've been there and I've done that, yeah, I grew up with a single mom on food stamps, and now here I was, a single mom. And I was going to have to really reach into those resources and figure out how to not just survive, but to thrive, because my children and I deserved to not just survive. And we gamified it. We gamified getting out of debt. We gamified we don't call it a budget because people don't like that word. We call it a money plan. Right? So time and money should be spent on paper first. Otherwise, it just slips through your fingers. So we gamified it. And now they are grown and flown, living on their own, and they both do very well with their money. My oldest is becoming a CPA. But they are completely independent at 20 and 23. They are not under my wing and do not need me to financially support them. So I did something right. And I've helped hundreds of business owners and people, you don't have to be a business owner, but people, to figure out how to take control of their money and what I call get comfy with the F word, finances, because we don't talk about it. It's that F word that no one wants to talk about.
Right.
So that's what I do.
Yeah. So that's amazing, man. That you went through this and you kind of had to learn, like, teach yourself, and basically, there's an expression for this, which is when if you have the option to sink or swim, you'll learn how to swim. When you're put in that situation. And I'm just glad that it worked out in your favor and that you were able to overcome that. Excuse me. I'll say that you mentioned something about not, kind of not knowing what was going on with the money, not knowing, the extent of what it was to manage it. It seems like money is just such a, I don't know. It's just a weird topic for a lot of, I feel like a lot of families don't discuss money maybe the way it should be.
We don't.
And I don't know why I mean, it's something that's fundamental to life. I would feel like I would feel like it's one of the most important things that need to be discussed with a family, you know, either with two partners or with the children, you know, at some point, maybe when they're teenagers or early adults. But, I mean, why is that? Why do we not discuss money? Like, is it just?
I think it's uncomfortable for people. I think that there's a level of guilt about wanting money. I think there's a level of guilt around how much we have or don't have. I grew up with a single mom who then remarried. I never had any idea about the finances because they didn't want my father to know, right? So they were afraid if I knew what was going on. So it was just never talked about with money. The one thing my mom did do, she was a bookkeeper as well, and she did the books for my grandfather. So I learned at a young age that, you know, it was a job, that you could track money as a job. And I remember this is where I got getting comfy with the F word, is the truck drivers would curse. I learned from the best. They curse like, you know, sailors, truck drivers, that's the saying for a reason. And he told me, look at how easy they can use that F word, but they won't come and talk to me about their check. And the same thing with growing up. My mom never talked about finances or why she said no. And I made my kids part. After that weekend, that Christmas, it was a Saturday after, it was just so clear to me. I made them part of the decision-making process for our family. They were part of the budgeting. They still know how much I make and where it goes. We did that as a family so that when I said no to something, they knew why. It wasn't because I wanted to be mean or punish them or anything else. It's because, okay, we have a choice. You can have that, and I said to them, we can give up our home, stop fighting for it, and move in with Nana. And life will be easier financially. Or we can give up some of these luxuries and keep our home. And you can stay here with your friends, and, you know, but we made that choice together. It wasn't just affecting me. So I decided to not let it just be my decision. And they decided to give up cable TV. They decided to give up Christmas and birthday presents. They're amazing thrifters. Oh, us in secondhand and thrifting, we're good. Right. And they still are. They outfitted their apartments that way, completely by themselves, with pots and pans and everything else, thrifting. I didn't give them anything. And, you know, it's when they became part of the solution, part of the decision-making process, I think it empowered them.
For sure.
And it made me not feel so guilty about saying no to them for things. So,
listen,
yeah.
I have a lot to say to that, but first, I have an echo. I'm hearing an echo on my end. It's like I'm echoing through you. Let me stop this, see if I can fix this really quick. We'll be right back. Okay, so you were saying about including your children in the decision-making process, in the solution. And what I was saying before that about money not being talked about in most families, you know, I think when we do that, either consciously or subconsciously, it makes us fear the whole concept of money. You know, it's like a hush-hush thing, and it's just something to be feared. I mean, I wouldn't say feared. I think it's something to take seriously. But if we don't talk about it to the point to where we fear it, I think that affects how we approach it. And I could be looking at this the wrong way, but I feel like, you know, if we have this idea around it to where it's something that can't be talked about, it can't be discussed, it can't be, you know, it's hard for us to have the conversation. I mean, that implies that it's something that should be feared that maybe shouldn't, you know.
Yeah, it's like it's taboo.
Right, exactly, yeah.
Even I looked at some of my children's friends, and one of my oldest, they were in high school, and one of her friends was like, oh, let's go here. And Elizabeth said, you know, I don't have the money for that. And her friend said, oh, just go to the ATM and get money, right? And my daughter said, I can't, there's nothing to pull from. And her friend was like, no, you just go to the ATM. She did not realize that her parents put the money in there for her.
Yeah.
There was never a conversation about it. She just knew that she could go and get money. There was never a conversation, and she's had a huge awakening being an adult and realizing that it's just not funded all the time. I mean, her parents still fund her and pay for her rent. However, she's
Mhm.
realizing she has to put money in the bank. She has to figure out where her money went. And that's a huge thing that people don't realize, that if you don't become intentional with your money, it just disappears. Right? Say
Quickly.
again, I say time and money, it just disappears. I time block how I'm going to spend my time. I schedule myself when I'm going to work out. I schedule things so that I make sure I get it done. I do the same thing with money. I schedule when I'm going to pay things. I schedule when I'm going to invoice people. I schedule it so it gets done. That becomes intentional.
And do you think through the scheduling, do you think through some sort of process, that's how, I guess the question here would be, how do we, for, the lack of the education, assuming that at some point we learned that, what is the next step? Like, how do we continue to tackle this problem? Because I think the education is only one of the problems. I mean, it's a very big problem, but once we know about it, then it's like, oh, well, like, what do we do now? Because
So it's big to, first things first is start tracking, right? And this is the first step I do with people all the time when they're like, I don't know where all my money went. Okay, because you're not tracking it. Or they
Mhm.
don't even know exactly how much money they're making. So let's start tracking it. That's the first step, right? When you get a diet coach, they tell you to start tracking what you're eating, because people aren't always aware of how many calories they're eating, just like we don't realize how much money we're spending
Mhm.
or getting. So the first thing is to track it. Well, I never realized until recently that people don't know the next step. And I had someone say to me, all right, I've tracked it. Now what? And I was like, what do you mean now what? Well, not everybody knows. Now what? Okay, so now here's where it's gone. Well, now you get to review. Wow, did I really want to spend that much at Dunkin' Donuts?
Mhm.
Did I really want to spend that much, going out? Or, wow, I didn't have as much left over as I thought. This is why I'm not getting ahead. And when they start to see where it went, now you can say, okay, here are these buckets, right? There's a bucket for rent, or mortgage. There's a bucket for your utilities, which I break into sub buckets to be even more intentional. Like, I know my cell phone bill is a flat rate, but my electricity, I have some say over,
Mhm.
right? And we made a game, and what I did is I stopped using debit card. I put my debit cards away. I got rid of my credit cards. I put them in. I wasn't ready to let go of them completely, so I
Right.
put them in a Ziploc full of water and froze them.
Hmm.
So I had to really want to use them, right? There's no impulse buying, because you got to unfreeze that bugger. Takes a hair
Right.
dryer, by the way, just so you know. You got to do it with a hair dryer. But I started using cash envelopes of like, okay, so here are my buckets, which I put in envelopes: the rent, the utilities, the food shopping, the everything that you have on that you just tracked makes into an envelope. And now we put how much we want to or have to, because I don't have a choice how much my mortgage is, right? How much we want to spend on each of those items. And as money comes in, we have to fill the envelopes accordingly.
Mhm.
Now, the ones that we have say over, such as food, electricity, fun money, right? We gamified it, the girls and I did, in seeing how much we could have left over in that envelope. The goal wasn't to spend it all. The goal was to have a little bit left over. And we took that and we started to create an emergency fund so that we didn't need our credit cards. So
Mhm.
we didn't go into debt. I call debt, don't even buy that. Just don't. Right? Because now whatever you spent on your credit card, it's going to cost you way more because of interest.
Right.
Right? So let's have an emergency fund. Let's have a slush fund as well. And if we can save a little bit in each envelope, not spend it all, that can go to our emergency fund or our slush fund. So we don't need to use a credit card and then spend more than we wanted to on whatever it was we're buying with the credit card. So it's being really intentional and aware. And I'm sorry, but swiping a card, it's easy, right? You don't
Oh
feel it.
yeah.
You don't
Yeah.
feel it. You don't realize how quickly. And so my oldest boyfriend, I had to teach him some money rules, because he would use his debit card, but he'd do what we call bank balance. reconciling where he'd look at his bank balance and say, oh, that's how much money I have, not realizing certain things haven't cleared yet because he didn't track. You can't say, oh, no, that check hasn't cleared, or this, I used my credit card or debit card and that hasn't cleared yet. So he'd swipe, and then like this $5 whatever on his debit card would then bounce over the weekend when everything processed, and he'd end up spending $25 because he got the $20 fee. So I taught him how to track so that he wasn't spending so much towards those bank charges, those overdraft fees. I have people that they're spending $1,000 a month on overdraft fees.
Wow.
And when we cut those out, that's $1,000 a month you can reinvest into yourself. And it's just because they're not being intentional with their money. So,
yeah. That debit card seems to be, you know what? I just had this thought, and this is, I'm going to copyright this, by the way. This is a patent for this thing. But what if there was a debit card that had like a digital amount on it, where you put a little code or something in and it shows you a digital amount that was in your bank? Wouldn't that be so cool? Because those debit
does that. QuickBooks does that. It has, so you can always, so being a bookkeeper, right? I'm a QuickBooks geek. Right. So one of the things I love about QuickBooks for small businesses is you can log in and you can see the bank balance all the time. It's always on your screen, the bank balance, right? But then it also, if you've tracked things, it shows you your book balance. So, okay, if everything clears, here's what's in the bank. But if everything clears and we've put like the checks in and paid your bills, this is where your bank balance really is.
Right.
Which is, for some people, that's a huge aha moment of, wow, this is my bank balance. But if everything clears, and I have people write out all their bills, like put their bills into QuickBooks, all their expenses, so they know how much is left over to spend.
Yeah.
We watch that red line, right? Because it has this red line of, oh my gosh, you're overdrawn. That's what, you don't want to be in the red. That means you're overdrawn. So watching that red disappear and turn into green is fun.
Yeah. And, as a business owner, that is one reason I really do not like checks. I don't like check because you don't know when they're going to clear. You have to go back through and say, oh, well, did this check clear? I mean, like, you can't see whether, versus if it's an electronic payment, the person receiving it might be a couple days or whatever, but it usually comes out of your account whenever the payment's made. But checks, that's one of the reasons I don't like writing checks, because if you send somebody a check, I mean, they might hold that thing for a couple weeks, Excuse me, and you're like
right there with you. It's a pay. A, you have to pay for them. B, like, who knows when they're going to clear? And then if someone loses it, and there's a huge amount of fraud. It's called washing the check, where someone finds it because people now take their phone and deposit their check with a picture, right?
Yep.
So now the check's in the trash. People find it in the trash barrel, and the thieves take that copy of a check and they'll wash it and reuse it at multiple banks, and they just emptied your account. Because it takes a couple days to catch. So I am not a big check fan. Also, if you're a business owner and you have to deal with 1099 subcontractors, don't write them a check. As soon as you're using your debit or credit card, now that processor is responsible for 1099ing them. You don't have to. You just saved yourself a ton of work in January.
Wow. I didn't realize that.
Yeah, that's my cheater way. Like, let's not do 1099s anymore. And you can do that simply by using a third-party processor to pay any of your vendors. And third-party meaning PayPal, Zelle, Cash App, MasterCard, Visa. Those are all third parties. So it's not cash or check. And now you don't have to worry about 1099s.
Listen, time out for just a second. I am still hearing this echo. Can you maybe just turn your computer volume down as low as whatever you need to hear me? Because I think what it is
is that better?
I don't know. I got this cough thing going on. I don't know. It's like certain things that I say, if I'm talking like repeatedly like this, I can't hear it. But if it's like a one word type thing, I can kind of hear. But
maybe
I don't hear anything now. No, I think it sounds like it's coming from your speaker into your microphone, and I have your echo turned off. So I think
my echo's turned off on my end too, and I had that reverberation, so I turned off my external microphone and used the computer microphone because it lessened it.
Okay. Yeah. I think that's what it is it's coming through your speaker and then back into the computer microphone. And so, but I haven't heard anything in the couple of seconds we've been talking about this. So maybe we're good.
Maybe we're good.
Yeah. Okay, so yeah, the debit card. Oh, the credit card. I was going to say about the credit cards, man. People don't like if you make in most credit cards, if you make unless you have an outstanding interest rate, if you make a minimum payment on a credit card, that balance is going to go down very little, if any. You know, and that was a lesson I had to learn with my first credit card. I was like, man, I'm making the payment on this thing, you know, and it's on time and all this kind of stuff. Yeah, and this is just to reiterate the importance of financial education, man. I was never taught that. When I got my first credit card, I was like, oh man, I got a credit card. I can do something now. And then I didn't know all these things, you know?
29% interest rate. You're paying a third more. It's a 29% interest rate on most credit cards. So you bought something for $10 if you put it on your credit card, you're going to pay $13 for it.
Right.
And then you're going to pay a third of the 13. And then you're going to so it ends up getting bigger as opposed to getting smaller. So what I did with my children is I did get them credit cards. Like I helped them when I had them be signers on mine. I do use credit cards. I will tell you they are safer than debit cards, fraud wise, because with a debit card, right, it comes right out of your bank instantly. With a credit card, you have the time because you don't have to pay it right away. So you have 30 days. So it's not drawn out of your bank. It's drawn out of the creditor's bank, but you can also dispute it. You have time. So right. I got my kids on my business credit card when they were old enough to learn how to start using it because I wanted to teach them. But I also taught them, okay, anything you spend this week, we started with daily. You spent it on your credit card, now you got to pay it. Go online and pay it each day. And then we worked it out to once a week. And this is where we've stayed, which they now have their very own. But they use credit cards, not debit cards, but they pay it off every week. So they use it for gas. They use it for food shopping and things like that, which helps cash flow. And especially if you're a business, that's a good thing because sometimes we have to buy supplies and we don't get paid until we've invoiced. So we need that gap time for our cash flow. That's fine. Just know, pay it off. Don't let it sit on month over month. Pay it off. And yeah, it'll save you money.
So I've heard before, I don't know if this is true or not, it's safer to use credit cards for like online shopping because if your debit card gets hacked, let me back up. It's safer for the consumer because if your debit card gets hacked, that's your money. But if the credit card gets hacked, that's essentially the institution, the bank's money. The
institution's money. Yep. Huge difference. That's why I don't use debit cards. I shy away from them. I encourage my clients to not use them. Please let's use your credit card for cash flow, not to purchase something you can't afford, but to actually protect your purchases. Because again, a debit card has direct access to your money.
Right.
A credit card isn't your money. So you've saved your money, right? You've protected it. You've put it in a shell. Like my daughter, she got a sign-on bonus for her new job. Well, we did not put that right in the bank. We put that in a CD so that it's protected. You know, it's not even in her savings account where, it's protected. You want levels of or layers of protection for your money. Once you start to get some, right? So if you're like me and a single mom and struggling, okay, we have to figure out how to make it so you're no longer just treading water. We got to get your head above water. Once your head's above water and we can get you an emergency fund, okay, now we can start to work on, you're never going to outsave your debt, right? Never. What's the savings rate? When you put stuff in savings, what is it? 2%, 5% if you're lucky, if it's high yield. Debt's 29%.
Right.
So the first thing to do to get to create wealth is to stop paying on debt. Get rid of it. It's a tool. You just don't want to pay that high interest rate because you can't outsave it.
So with that being said, this might be sort of a contentious area because you hear people, what I'm about to say next might be contentious, not what you just said, because you hear people say, like, as a business owner, debt is a good thing. Like some debt can be a good thing. Like if you're going to start a business, if you could, it's not this way. And I know it's not this way, but it seems like you can just create money out of thin air, And so what would you tell a person when they're distinguishing between bad debt and like good debt, if there is such a thing?
I have a whole chapter on this. I wrote an ebook called Getting Comfy with the F Word, and I have a whole chapter specifically about good and bad debt because not all debt is created equal, right? getting a home, buying an asset, right? So if you buy like a home or a car, something that's going to produce money for you is an asset. So buying an asset on a loan or on debt isn't a bad thing as a business owner. If you wanted to buy inventory, which you can turn around and sell, if you needed to buy supplies, which you can turn around and make money on. My office, I have a she shed, right? I took out a loan to buy this because it was $20,000. I don't have $20,000 to cash flow that, but it produces me money, and it's a depreciation. Right now we get that expense as a business owner. So we can depreciate this. I'm going to depreciate this over 20 years. So it's $1,000 a year that I get as an expense, but I used someone else's money. Did I pay it back? I did, because I finagled it. I got 0% for a year, right? That means I got to borrow their money for free.
Right.
Now you can negotiate some of these terms. And so the revolving debt, like credit card debt, is not good debt, especially if you're going to use it for convenience items or things that you can't afford in the first place. If you're using debt for something you can't afford in the first place, then it's bad debt. So I needed a new car. My car was quite old. It had 320,000 miles on it. It was 14 years old. It was rusting out. My mechanic is like, it will cost me more to fix it to make it safe. You need a new car. So I knew that about a year ahead of time when I got it. You have to get it inspected and everything. He's like, it's not going to pass next year. So I started paying myself what I thought I could afford for a car loan, right? Which gave me a down payment. So first I looked at, okay, what is it I want? What is it I need? Because there's need versus want, right? And what can I afford? What's the down payment going to be required to get the payment in the range that I feel comfortable with spending? So I started paying myself that. So I knew I could afford it. When I say who can afford to go out and buy a $60,000 car, right? Most of us don't have $60,000 in our pocket to take out. So obviously we're going to put it on some type of finance plan. Same thing with a house. Who has $500,000 to go buy a house? Not too many people. So we get a mortgage. That's not necessarily bad debt. If you get too much of a mortgage that you can't afford, it's bad debt. It'll sink you. So if you think you can afford it, the payment plan, start paying yourself that at least for 3 months, if not 6. Because you're going to start to get used to making the payment. It's going to become part of your money plan, and you're going to realize whether you can or can't afford it.
Yeah. I'll tell you this, just personally, when you talk about these loans and stuff, I think whether it's business or personal, but just my personal preference, man, I would really just rather shy away from like the personal loan type situation. If it's going to be a personal, like if it's going to be a loan where the bank gives you money for the business or whatever, I would much rather get like a revolving, like something that's like a line of credit or something like that. Because
the problem with that is line of credit, they can call in at any time. So when COVID hit, right, I had business owners that had business lines of credit, which meant they could pull from that line. They maybe some of them had a $2,000 line of credit. Some of them had way more, and they could pull from that line. Well, when things started to crash financially, a lot of banks called in their line of credit, which meant it was all due right now. And typically you have to sign something like there's something that they can now take away. So when you have a car and you have a car payment, they can take your car back. If you have a piece of equipment with the line, they can go take that piece of equipment back. So typically there's something on the line, not just your name. So a line of credit I like for a lot of reasons, but people have to realize, and a lot of people didn't, that institution can call in your line of credit at any time and decide they want you to pay it in full and close you down.
I didn't realize that. I didn't realize that was a thing.
Yep. Yeah, read that fine print. They can give you 30 days. 30 days is typically what they're allowed to give you. And then you have to pay it all back. What happens if you don't? They have something they can levy.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
And especially if it's in your bank, they can start to pull the funds from your operating account.
Yeah, they might give you one of those small ones, with no collateral, but you're not going to get a bigger one unless you have some kind of collateral on the line.
And people don't, when I say something on the line, that's collateral, right? People don't always realize what collateral is, but there's something on the line.
Mm-hmm.
not just your name. You're going to have to put on to offset that it's a loan.
Yep. Right.
And here's what a lot of people don't realize: when you're a business owner, that money you received from the loan isn't taxable. Great, right? But the money coming out of your account to pay that loan back is not a deduction.
Right.
So here we look at your profit and loss, and people are like, oh my gosh, where'd all my money go? I don't have $30,000 at the end of the day. It says I profited $30,000. Where'd it go? Look at your balance sheet. What are you paying on your credit cards? What are you paying for loans? What do you have on your balance sheet that's sucking up your cash flow?
And a lot of them too, they have to have zero balance at least some portion of the year, and that's another thing too.
So I say use it as a tool. It's a wonderful tool. I use it myself, absolutely. But you have to know the risks, and you have to know if you can cash flow those payments easily. And I like people to get a buffer. So first we're going to get your head above water. Then we're going to create a little emergency fund, right? Then we're going to start to pay off your debt. Like, let's get that debt paid down. Do I say to zero all the time? No, because believe it or not, having a little balance helps your credit score. So we have a little balance. I try to get it under 3%. Little balance. And then we want to start to really, once the debt is paid off, now we want to start to get a 3 to 6 month slush fund. And the people that did that sailed through COVID, and a lot of businesses that didn't ended up shutting down. Yep. Because that was a 3 to 6 month shutdown. Some states were none, like New Hampshire. We didn't shut down at all. Live free and die, right? But some states shut down completely, like Maine, yep, right next door. They were shut down for almost a year. And people could not, in Washington, the state of Washington, they did not allow people to go to work and to open their businesses. So we need some type of backup plan for all businesses. Have slow times, right? It's not an if, it's a when. We all deal with those slow times. And we still have the same bills. We still have the same rent. We still have the same payroll. All these things we still have to pay still. So we want enough money to cover our slow times, which is why we track to know, okay, when are we really busy? When's money really good? When's money slow? How much do I need to put aside during my busy time to cover my slow time?
Yep.
So that we don't have to worry about scrambling during those slow times.
Yeah.
It's fun.
Yeah, because it is fun. I mean, as a person who I own a landscaping company, and so a large portion of our revenue is generated probably 8 or 9 months out of the year, and then for the other 3-4 months is very slow. So and I talk to I have a lot of people that I work with that are in similar industries but different industries, and
Yep.
and it's kind of the same thing for them. There's a seasonal thing, and it's that's a learning curve.
Well, I'm about to publish a blog about seasonal work and how to help your cash flow for seasonal work, how to prepare for it, how to deal with it, because I have a lot of seasonal clients, and I'm always teaching them how to make it so when you're making a lot of money, how to make it last, and how to deal with the down seasons.
Man, I need to sign up for that thing. I need to get on that one.
I'll get you on my mailing list and send it to you.
For sure. Okay, so other than the lack of education, lack of financial education, I guess you could lump a lot of this stuff into that, the lack of just the ignorance basically around some of this debt and this kind of thing, whether it's cards or line of credits, whatever. What would you say is other common issues that you see with business owners who are or just people in generally who are just struggling financially? What, other than these things, what are some common issues that you see personally?
Most businesses got into business because they love what they do. They don't love bookkeeping, right? Who I didn't grow up wanting to be a bookkeeper. I hated math. Yes, I'm one who hated math. However, you get into business and you don't realize, A, that you need to track your income. You need to be intentional with it and your spending, and you can play the game of, especially using credit cards, we can play the cash flow game. But then they don't understand taxes. They don't understand their tax structure. Like, a lot of people don't realize that they're self-employed. They are, in the IRS's eyes, they're a business. As soon as you start making money that's not on payroll, you are self-employed. You're a subcontractor. You're in business, which means you have to report your taxes. What does that look like? People don't understand taxes. They here we go. We're just going to have someone else do it. I love explaining your taxes. Now, I'm one of those weird people that geeks out on taxes because the tax code was written for business owners. So I don't care if you have a full-time gig, get a side hustle. If you have a W-2 employee full-time, do something part-time so that you can take advantage of the tax code. Because all of a sudden now you get write-offs. What are write-offs? They're also known as deductions. People think they're two different things. It's one and the same. So if you made $100, right? Say you sold a pizza for $100. Well, some of the deductions are the ingredients that you bought to make the pizza. So let's say that it cost you $50 in ingredients and the box and the whatever else to make the pizza. So now you only made $50 because you had those deductions, which were the costs that you had to create the item you sold. But you also have other write-offs, including, okay, well, you needed your car to go and buy the ingredients, right? So we can either deduct your car or the mileage. What about your cell phone to call the people to sell it, right? So you can get the order when they're calling you, or you're going to call the advertising, all these things, right? So now your cell phone. What about the gas that it took to cook the pizza or the electricity? What about, there's so many things that people don't think of that are now write-offs. Stuff that you would have spent money on anyway are now part of your business expenses.
Yep.
And that's the joy of business ownership.
And write-offs is like after you make the money. I would even go a step further and say expenses, because once you know what it costs to make that pizza, now you know how many pizzas you have to generate to make a profit, or just to break even and then make a profit, And I think that's a lot of things
people don't get. They don't know what they're profiting. So they're looking at, okay, hey, I had one guy say to me, I don't understand. I had $1 million in sales. Why do I have no money? And I said, because it took you $2 million to get those sales.
Right.
You would have made more money doing nothing and going to the beach, because now you're $1 million in the hole. So we need to know, okay, what's the profit margin? And from there, okay, what's the best tax bracket for you? So a DBA, which is a doing business as, an LLC, single member LLC, or a sole proprietor. According to the IRS, you're all the same. It's all the same. Those are legal structures. Those are not tax structures. So with all those structures, all you get is what's called a Schedule C on your taxes, which is just your profit and loss. It's a fancy word for your profit and loss. So, and what is the profit and loss? It's your income and expenses. So when you realize that's all it is, and then I had she's a dear friend of mine. She's actually my dad's ex-wife. So she's ex-stepmother. I don't know. I don't know what to call her. She came to me because she was having a hard time, and her CPA made her a C corporation, which is the most expensive way to be in business. Why? So I worked with her and we got her out of her being a C corporation. So because that's a 37% tax rate.
Wow.
So we got her out of being a C corporation. Now you're forced to have payroll. You're forced to do all these things that cost you money. So let's get you out of that. And we got her into a single member LLC. And all of a sudden now she's at an 11% tax rate because it's her personal tax rate.
Man, that's a third of almost between a third and a quarter of what she was paying.
And to do her taxes, so now a $1,500, just the form to file as a C Corp, your CPA is going to charge you $1,500 to do your taxes. As a single member LLC or a sole prop, it's $300. So not only are you saving on how much you're paying on taxes, now you're saving on how much it's costing you to get your taxes done. Totally different. So
financial education, and that includes debt, knowing about debt, taxes. What else? What's something else? I feel like there's got to be something else big.
They don't realize how much your personal financial situation affects your business financial situation. So I can tell when I do someone's books, I can tell what's going on at home. If there's stress at home. So if you are a mess at home financially, it's going to impact your business finances. Because, you're robbing Peter to pay Paul, right? You keep sucking out of the business to help. The reverse is true as well. If your business finances are a mess, it's going to affect your home finances, because now personally you're going to try and support that business. So when I talk to people, I don't just help them with their business books. We work on your personal stuff as well. We need to get that in order because they're like twins. They're hand in hand best friends. If one is falling off the cliff, the other one's going with them, right?
Right.
Or if one's going up the mountain, it's dragging the other one along. Let's work together and they both need to be healthy.
Mm-hmm.
It's important. And so they don't realize how important it is to understand cash flow, right? Profit, if you're profiting. And when I talk about cash flow, it's not just your profit and loss, it's your profit and loss and the stuff on your balance sheet all together. All of the inflows and outflows, including your debt. And if you look at your profit and loss, nowhere on there is your owner's equity, stuff that you took personally from the business. Nowhere on there is your debt payments. And that's why you don't know where your money went. So understanding that. Understanding the right tax entity that you are. Let's pick one. Let's understand. And even understanding, should I be, when you're doing your personal taxes, should I be married filing separately? Should I be married filing jointly? Am I head of household? People file incorrectly all the time and they cost themselves, they pay Uncle Sam more than they should. Even people that have regular W-2 employee income, people get all excited that, I'm getting a $5,000 refund. Great. You just gave Uncle Sam a $5,000 interest-free loan. What could you have done with that $5,000 over the year?
Right.
I'd rather put it to work for me than give it to Uncle Sam, because not for nothing, from what I've seen, Uncle Sam doesn't handle his money very well.
Right.
Right?
For sure.
I'm going to give Uncle Sam an interest-free loan. So how can we make it so, where are you at so that you can have more money in your paycheck, more money coming into you? I'd rather owe Uncle Sam $10 than have him give me back $5,000.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what we work on too.
So have you ever worked with somebody who's like going through a bankruptcy, and if so, like what do you think is the main thing that kind of sends people, just from what you've seen, that kind of sends people in that direction? Is, I mean, obviously not managing the funds, but if there's something specific, like are they just is it a lack of profit margin? Are they taking too much for themselves? I mean, what do you think?
82% of small businesses fail due to cash flow issues. 82%. Okay. That's a huge fail rate.
Yeah, sure.
Simply because they're not managing their cash flow properly. And why do they not manage their cash flow properly? They don't track it. It's really from lack of tuning in and knowing. When you start to track it, and I'm not talking, don't do it at the end of the year. It should be, for me, I say weekly. Know what your sales were and your expenses were each week to know if you made a profit. What are your sales goals? What do you have to earn? I know exactly what I have to bring home to pay my household bills.
Mm-hmm.
Right? If you don't know how much you have to bring home, which means you don't know how much you have to sell to cover your business expenses so you can bring it home from your business. Right? So this is where I said, if you don't get your personal and your business both in good shape, your personal can sink your business and your business can sink your personal. Bankruptcy, even in a business, hits you personally. Right? And if you file bankruptcy personally, good luck getting any type of business help.
Right.
Because it's still your name on the line. So it's usually they're not watching their cash flow. They're not understanding how much it's costing them to be in business and how much they should charge, how much they need to charge, how much they have to make. And then it's the whole, I call it the microwave society, or, let's go back to Willy Wonka and Veruca Salt, but Daddy, I want it now, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's no delayed gratification. We're little 2-year-olds that we want what we want and we want it now. And we're not going to start to save up for it. We're just going to go buy it. We're going to buy it with our credit cards. We're going to buy it and not pay our rent or mortgage because people do it for Christmas all the time. All the time. I wrote a huge blog about not sinking yourself over the holidays because they go out and they shop because they want to buy presents for Christmas and then they don't pay their bills in December and they're catching up in January.
Yeah.
I would 6 months.
I would hate to be the credit card companies in January. I would hate to own a credit card company and January comes around.
Well, no, they love it because look at all the interest that they're making on those expenses.
Well, I guess so. And then right after that is tax season, and presumably people take their tax refunds or whatever and pay off their debt. Hopefully, pay off whatever debt they had. But yeah,
it's amazing. So most people. Bankruptcy is either from not tracking, not being intentional, not being aware. of how much you need to earn and how much you're overspending. And now you're using debt, right? And then you can't afford to, because those debt payments are brutal. Now you can't afford to pay your debt back. So now you're claiming bankruptcy and you sunk yourself. So I say it starts with just ripping the Band-Aid off, finding out where, it's like, where's Waldo, right? Finding out where you stand. And not everybody wants to know. Getting on the scale after Thanksgiving. Who wants to do that?
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
Same thing with finding out where you stand financially. Right? We're like, okay, no, I'm gonna do this first, and then we'll do our bookkeeping. No, we need to know where you stand now, because when you know where you stand now at least you can create a map to get where you want to go, and that map is your money plan. But if you are walking around a maze with a blindfold on, how are you ever going to get out? How do you know where to go? Where to turn? What to do next? We need a map. We need a plan.
So what would be, assuming you have all your numbers figured out and your cost and your profit and all that kind of stuff, what is the first step of that map? I mean, how do we move in that direction?
So if someone has debt, once we all have our numbers figured out, the first thing I do is we don't pay debt first. We give ourselves a good emergency fund, and for everybody that's different. I like to have a month of your bills as an emergency fund, right? I call it the oh shit money, right? Just in case something happens, we can pull that oh shit handle because we've got it in the bank waiting for us, and we don't have to use our credit cards.
So just to interrupt real quick, because I can see a loophole right here. What if somebody says, "Oh well, my credit card is paid off. That's my emergency fund." Does that count?
Although
Damn it! All right,
I like having, and I have one myself. I have a credit card for emergencies. Yes, absolutely. I use my emergency funds first, but if it's bigger than your typical, right? So my septic cost me $22,000. Do you think I had $22,000 just sitting in the bank? I did not. Right now, I did use my emergency fund to get them going, and then I had to work on the rest of it. And thankfully, like I had a few months warning. He's like, okay, we can wait a few months, but you're not going to make it through the winter. So I had to figure that out. Okay. But once we get that emergency fund, now we're going to start to track down that debt. And we can do a couple of systems. So we can either I put all of our debt in line, right? So the highest balance to the lowest, or the reverse if you want. And then I also put the interest rate. So I have them listed as the highest debt to lowest, as well as the highest interest rate to lowest. And we can choose. I personally, because I like to see results, I pay off your lowest balance first. I put absolute minimum payment to everything else. And I put everything we've got to that lowest balance, because then it's gone.
Right.
And then we take what we were paying there and we add it to the next card that has the next lowest balance. That's called the snowball method. There's another method where you pay the highest interest first, because that's costing you the most. Believe it or not, that's what's cost you the most. So paying off that highest interest first. You have to be a little more patient with that, because typically that's also your highest balance. So it's going to take a lot longer to pay that down. However, once it's gone, the amount of money that you're saving it's just so much more. You save more by paying that off first. Right. Sometimes we do a blended method. It depends on, I get to work with the person. What works best for that person? What's their mentality, their personality? What's their cash flow look like? Do they need to get that success so that they're encouraged to keep going? Or are they someone who's in it for that long haul and they're going to be disciplined for that bigger, longer game plan?
Yep.
We got to pay that debt off.
Kind of going back to what we talked about in the first part of this about being fearful with money or whatever. It sounds like this is a big deal, and it is a big thing. I know it's intimidating. It depends on how much debt you have, I guess, but it can be intimidating. But I guess the good news here is that, and I don't know, I'm just speaking strictly from assumption here. I guess your debt would be proportional to your income, because more than likely, oh, well, maybe not. I would just think that more than likely you're not going to get loans or cards or whatever that are outside of your, income range. So in other words, I would imagine if a person makes, I don't know, $250,000 a year, they're probably going to have more options as far as like debt they can get versus a person that makes 50,000? I don't know. I'm just assuming.
If the person with $250,000 a year income has a crap credit score, they're not getting anything. Right? If they haven't handled their debt, and that's all a credit score is how well you're handling your debt, right? So I have people with a not great income, but they can keep getting more debt because they're great about paying on it. They have a great credit score because they're wonderful at paying on it. So everybody wants to loan them money because they know they're going to get paid.
I see.
I have a millionaire I work with. He has a ton of money and he is terrible about paying his debt. He can't get loans very well at all. He's got to put a lot of money up front to get those loans because he has a terrible credit score. So it's a combination of your income, your debt to income ratio, and your credit score. So when we talk about debt to income ratio, if you have 50% of your income is tied up in debt, how much of a risk are you? How much money can you really pay off on that debt? Or if you only have 10%, which is why I try and keep people lower, because now we have that debt to income ratio is lower.
Yeah, I think that's kind of what I was saying, the debt to income, because if a person makes, 50,000, their debt to income is going to look different than a person who makes 100,000. Because if they, let's just say both of them combined, like both of them, separately, they each have 5,000 in debt, 5,000 debt of whatever kind of debt. It's the ratio is going to be different from the person who makes 100 than 50. And I think that's what I was kind of.
Yep. The more you make, the more you can get, provided you have a good credit score. Now, your credit score is also dependent on if you have a line of credit of $20,000 and you're only using 2 of it, then, oh, look at you have a lot, right? But if you have a line of credit and you've used the whole thing, so it's the percentage of usage of that debt. So if you have a credit card that's a $5,000 credit card and you only have a $250 balance, your usage is really low. But if you have a $5,000 credit card and you're at $499.98 all the time, right? Then your usage is pretty high, which makes your credit score go down. So it's a lot is determined on, yes, how much you make, but also your credit score. Yeah.
Well, the whole point, the whole purpose of me kind of saying that was just to say, it might seem like an intimidating thing if a person's in this situation, but it is doable to pay down your debt.
And there's a third option too. So if you don't feel confident in handling, doing focusing on one card at a time, you can also get a debt consolidation loan. And yes, it is for people that are in bad debt situations. And what happens is they roll it all into one and there's one payment. So typically it will save you money in a lot of ways, but it's also a bigger payment than if you just paid that credit card off. So you have to know, if you can afford to do that as well. But there's a lot of ways. Like once we get the debt down, now we can work on your wealth.
Yep.
Right. And not for nothing, insurance is a great protector of wealth. When I look at business people and I say, okay, what do you have? I just said, someone the other day, what do you have for insurance? He's a carpenter. He goes and he does, home repairs, small fix it guy. He has no insurance. And if something happens and someone sues him, he'll lose everything. So let's protect your wealth with the right insurance as well.
Right. Yeah.
Like health insurance. Health insurance, if you get sick and you don't have good health insurance, you're in the poorhouse pretty quick. I can speak from example. Scott had very good health insurance. He had Blue Cross Blue Shield. However, we still were left with $185,000 in medical debt at the end of 10 months. That's after insurance.
Yeah, you don't want to pay for that insurance until you need it. And then you wish you had it.
Well, here's the one thing I will tell you. If you buy a house, I did not know this existed until after Scott passed away. There is insurance that pays off your mortgage should one of the people on the mortgage die.
Wow. I didn't know that.
I didn't know that existed. So if I had known it and if I had had it, and I do have it now so that my children are protected, it cost me $98 a month. And I know if I get, something happens to me and I pass away, my house is paid off and they don't have to worry about it. If I had had that, imagine the different position we would be in. My girls and I would have been in a very different position. So I tell everybody, if you buy a house, get that insurance.
Yeah. Well, you would be in a different position, but you also you probably wouldn't know a lot of the things that and you wouldn't be out here helping people, get over this hump like what you're doing.
How to not do what I went through. Like it's bad enough if you lose your spouse, you're emotionally devastated. You don't want to be financially devastated too. right? There's
Right.
things that we put in place, especially if we're business owners. We're doing this to provide for our families. So what do we want to put in place? We want some short-term disability insurance. We want some life insurance. We want some of these things to make sure. And also, hey, get a cosigner or a beneficiary on your business account. Because here's the other thing. If something happens to you and there's no other signer on your account, your family has no right to touch the money in your account. It's a felony. It has to go to court.
Wow, I didn't know that.
Unless you get either, like right now, for a long time, it was my mother was my cosigner on my account. So if something happened to me, she could access the money, pay the bills, do whatever. But now that my children are older, they're beneficiaries. So if something happens to me, they have access. One of my clients, unfortunately, I lost him to COVID. Dear friend of mine. He never did that. I tried for years to get him to do that, but he did not. And that money, it took them 10 months to almost 11 months for the judge to assign a fiduciary person to have access to the money that was in his account. How was his wife and kids supposed to live for those 10, 11 months without
Right.
access to his funds?
Hmm.
If he had assigned that beneficiary, just at the bank, you can go and tell them, you don't have to have another signer, you can just have a beneficiary. Now that money isn't tied up. Your loved ones can actually do something with it.
Yeah. Listen, I know you got to get out of here in a couple minutes. Do you
I
have?
can talk about money forever.
Well, I mean, we definitely need to hear it, man. Because like I said, I think financial education is one thing. For whatever reason, we don't have it, and we should. I mean, it's one of the fundamental things, you know. Do you have a promotion or anything that you want to do? I don't know if this is.
I will shoot you a link to my Getting Comfy with the F Word book that people can download. I will also, people, if they follow me on either Facebook, EM Bookkeeping on Facebook or Instagram, I'm always putting out helpful hints and tips and tricks. And hey, did you know this? And right now I'm doing year-end prep, like 1099s and year-end things.
Mhm.
So I'm always putting stuff like that out. So yeah, follow me on socials. And I'll shoot you my links because I think it's really important that information gets out there. I do offer a call, a strategy call, so people can meet with me for about a half an hour and walk away with the next steps based on their particular position. And you don't have to hire me. I can tell you what you need to do to hire a bookkeeper, CPA, or what your next steps are based on exactly where you're at right now. And usually I geek out and I really love getting people on the road to financial freedom.
Yeah. Yeah, I appreciate that because, like I said, we really need that. You know, we need that. We need people like that because we don't, for whatever reason, we don't have it. Let me ask you one other thing before we close out. What if you had to kind of pinpoint one of the most important lessons you've ever learned? It can be through finance or your personal or anything that you're kind of comfortable sharing. If you could just kind of pinpoint like one of the most important lessons you've ever learned, what do you think one of those would be?
Don't wait. Someday is a disease that will kill you. Don't wait. Today is the day. Do it now. Whatever it is, whatever you've been thinking of or wanting, whether it's starting a business or taking control of your money or getting healthy or someone that you wanted to reach out to, don't wait. Tomorrow isn't promised, right? And if we keep saying someday, it never gets done. So put it on the books, schedule the time to do it. Don't wait. Do it now. Time is short. Life is short. You know, and we've got to take advantage of the time that we have in front of us right now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because we can talk about money all day long, but the truth is that time is the most valuable thing we have.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we can make the money or borrow the money or whatever, but
you can always make more money, right? You can always make more money. You can't make more time.
Exactly. Yeah.
So take advantage of the days that you have, and if there's somebody that you wanted to make amends with, or somebody that you wanted to tell them that you love them or you miss them, or someone just to catch up with, or if there's something that you did want to start a business, right? Don't wait. Do it now. Now is the time. And that's my biggest thing. I've say it all the time to people. What are you waiting for? When there's never a perfect time. What are you waiting for? Now is the time.
Yeah, if you wait for the right time is going to pass you up. It can be one day or it can be day one,
Yes. I
and
like that. One day or day one. So I say there's no such thing as someday. Don't do the some days. Do it now.
mhm. Listen, I think that's a great way to end this thing. I really appreciate your time, man. I appreciate your expertise. We'll have to do this again and maybe go into more detail. I'm curious to we'll have to do
We can
this
do this
again.
again. We can do another one about 1099s and taxes because they're coming. The season is here.
Yeah, gosh, people, you're right. People don't. I mean, they just put that off on somebody else, and they say, "Oh, this person can handle it. H&R Block, whoever it is, my accountant, whatever." And we don't think about it. All they care about is, well, how much am I getting back? How much I have to pay? That's all we're worried about. and so,
Yep.
and so, but yeah, man, I know you got to get out of here. I appreciate your time. I appreciate everything. If you want to send me the links, I'll put them in this stuff,
Yep.
and we can go
I
from
will.
there.
I'll shoot you the link so that people can take advantage.
Okay, hang out for just a second. Let
I
me
will.
hang out. Let me show you this upload situation.